My parents called me at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday and told me to wire them $50,000. Right now. No explanation. Just my mother's voice shaking and my father in the background saying, "Just do it, Caroline." I thought someone was dying. I booked a flight for the next morning. I didn't even pack properly, just threw clothes in a bag and sat on my couch until 4 a.m., staring at my phone, waiting for the call that would tell me who I'd lost. The call never came. When I walked into their house unannounced 36 hours later, I found wedding magazines covering the dining table, my mother laughing on the phone with a caterer, and my sister trying on her engagement ring under the kitchen light like she was in a jewelry commercial. Nobody was dying. Nobody was even sick. They'd used my fear to fund my sister's wedding. And the worst part? They weren't even surprised to see me. My mother just looked up and said, "Oh, you're here early." That's the moment everything changed. But to understand why that moment broke something in me, you need to know what it was like growing up as the invisible daughter in a family that only saw one child. My name is Caroline. I'm 32 now, but for most of my life, I've been playing a role I never auditioned for. I was 5 years old when my sister was born, and that's when I stopped being a kid and became useful instead. Nobody sat me down and explained this. It just happened. One day I had parents who noticed me, and the next day I had a baby sister who cried a lot, and suddenly my job was to make sure she stopped crying. I walked her to school every morning starting when I was 10. I waited outside her classroom because she didn't like walking home alone. I learned how to make mac and cheese from a box and how to forge my mother's signature on permission slips because she was always too busy with my sister's dance classes or soccer games or whatever new activity my sister had decided to try that week. If my sister cried, it was an emergency. If I cried, it was an attitude problem. I remember being 12 years old and missing an after-school art program I'd been excited about for weeks because my sister didn't feel like taking the bus home. My mother didn't even ask if I minded. She just said, "Your sister needs you," like that explained everything. Another time, I brought home a report card with straight A's. My teacher had written a note about how I was one of the best students she had in years. My mother looked at it for maybe 5 seconds before she started talking about my sister's upcoming dance recital. These weren't big, dramatic moments. That's what made them worse. They were small and constant and so normal that I didn't even realize what was happening until I was already halfway through college. By the time I graduated, I understood 2 things clearly. First, nothing would ever be handed to me. Second, if I wanted a different life, I'd have to build it alone. So I did. I moved to a city 3 states away where nobody knew my family. I worked 60-hour weeks. I saved money. I built a career. I became someone. From the outside, it probably looked like I was running away. From the inside, it felt like I was finally breathing. But here's the thing about families like mine. Distance doesn't change the dynamic. It just makes it harder to see until they need something. And they always need something. I'd been sending my parents money for 3 years. Not huge amounts at first, just $500 here, $1,000 there. They said things were tight. My father had some medical bills. The roof needed repairs. Normal stuff that happens when people get older. I sent it because that's what you do. That's what I'd been trained to do since I was 5 years old. When family needs help, you help. You don't ask questions. You just fix it. Then came the phone call. It was late. I was already in bed, halfway asleep, when my phone lit up. My mother's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer. I had an early meeting the next morning, but something made me pick up. Caroline. Her voice was wrong. Tight and high and scared. I sat up immediately. "Mom? What's wrong?" "We need money. $50,000. As soon as you can send it." My heart stopped. What? Why? What happened? I can't explain right now. We just need it. Please. I was already out of bed, pacing my bedroom. Is someone hurt? Is Dad okay? Your father's fine. We need the money. Can you send it tonight? Tonight? Mom, I need to know what's going on. She made a sound like a sob. Caroline, Please. Don't make this harder. We're asking for help. Then my father's voice, loud in the background. Just tell her to send it. We don't have time for this. My hands were shaking. Put Dad on the phone. There was a shuffle, then my father's voice, sharp and impatient. Caroline. This is urgent. We need you to stop asking questions and just help us. I'm not sending $50,000 without knowing why. Because we're your parents. Because family helps family. Because we raised you and this is what you do when your parents need something. The guilt hit immediately, like it always did. The old instinct that said questioning them made me a bad daughter. Is someone sick? I tried again. Nobody's sick. It's just urgent. If you trust us, you'll help. That's all you need to know. The call ended with him telling me they'd send me their account information. Then the line went dead. I sat on the edge of my bed for an hour, phone in my hand, trying to understand what had just happened. On paper, everything sounded familiar. They needed help. They were stressed. They were my parents. But something felt wrong in a way I couldn't name. They hadn't asked for money like this in years. Not since I'd moved away and they'd realized I was doing well. Not since I'd stopped being someone they could control directly. And $50,000? That wasn't roof repair money. That was something else. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw hospital rooms. I saw my father in a bed hooked up to machines. I saw funerals and regrets and all the terrible possibilities my brain could create. By morning, I'd made a decision I'd never made before. I wasn't going to just send the money and hope for the best. I was going to show up and see for myself. I didn't tell them I was coming. I told myself it was because I wanted to surprise them, but the truth was simpler than that. I wanted to see what was really going on before they had time to prepare their story. The flight was 4 hours. I spent it staring out the window, watching clouds and trying to convince myself I was overreacting. Maybe there was a real emergency. Maybe I was being paranoid. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I rented a car at the airport and drove to their house. It was late afternoon when I pulled into the neighborhood. The sun was starting to set, turning everything gold and normal looking. Their house was lit up like Christmas. Every window glowing. Not harsh, panicked emergency lighting. Warm, comfortable, like people were having a good time inside. I sat in the rental car for 5 minutes, engine off, staring at that house. Nothing about it looked like a crisis. I finally got out and walked to the front door. I still had my key from years ago. I unlocked it and walked in. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Fresh coffee. Something sweet baking in the oven. The smell of a normal Tuesday evening, not an emergency. I heard voices from the kitchen. Laughter. Laughter. My mother saw me first. She was standing at the kitchen island, and when she turned and saw me in the doorway, her face went blank for half a second before she forced a smile. Caroline. You didn't say you were coming. You said it was urgent. I wanted to make sure everything was okay. She exchanged a look with my father. He was sitting in his usual chair, looking comfortable and relaxed, a magazine open in his lap. Not dying. Not sick. Not in any kind of distress at all. I thought someone was hurt, I said. My voice sounded strange even to me. We're fine, my mother said quickly. It's just not the kind of emergency you're thinking of. That's when I saw the papers on the table. Wedding magazines. Vendor brochures. A thick planning binder with colored tabs sticking out. Fabric samples. A list of venues with prices written in my mother's handwriting. I stared at them, my brain trying to catch up to what I was seeing. Then my sister walked in. She had her phone in her hand, smiling at the screen, completely relaxed. When she looked up and saw me, she stopped. Just for a second. Then she smiled like we were old friends running into each other at the store. Oh, you're here. I looked down at her left hand automatically. The ring caught the light from the ceiling fixture. Big. Expensive. The kind of ring that costs more than most people's cars. Nobody said anything for a moment. The kitchen was full of normal sounds. The refrigerator humming. The oven timer ticking. The sound of a family that wasn't in crisis at all. My mother started talking, her words coming fast like she'd been preparing them. Planning a wedding is so stressful these days. Everything costs so much more than it used to. Your sister's been overwhelmed, and we thought. You thought what? I interrupted. You thought you'd tell me someone was dying so I'd send you $50,000 for a wedding? My father stood up. Don't be dramatic. Dramatic. I laughed, but it didn't sound like laughter. I thought you were sick. I got on a plane. I've been terrified for 2 days. My sister rolled her eyes. You're always like this. Making everything about you. That sentence did something to me. It was like a door opening in my head, showing me a room I'd been locked out of my whole life. I didn't make this about me, I said quietly. You did. When you lied. Nobody lied, my mother said quickly. We just didn't want to worry you with details. You told me it was urgent. You made it sound like an emergency. You let me think. I stopped. My hands were shaking. You knew what I'd think. That's why you called like that. My father crossed his arms. We needed you to act, not overthink. You would have said no if we'd told you the truth. There it was. The honesty I'd been waiting for. And the money I've been sending you? I asked. Every month for 3 years? You said that was for medical bills. For repairs. For emergencies. My mother's face changed. Just slightly. That was different. How? That was family support. This is for your sister's wedding. I actually laughed then. Real laughter this time, sharp and bitter. So let me understand. I've been paying your bills for 3 years because you told me you were struggling. And now I'm supposed to pay $50,000 for a wedding too? My sister straightened up. That money was just helping out. This is actually important. Important. It's my wedding. She said it like that explained everything. I pulled out my phone. Calmly. Not aggressive, just deliberate. I've kept track, I said. Every payment. Every transfer. Want to know what it adds up to? My mother went pale. Why would you do that? Because I stopped trusting you. The words hung in the air between us. My sister's eyes widened. You were tracking us? That's insane. No, I said. What's insane is telling your daughter someone's dying so she'll pay for a party. It's not a party, my sister snapped. It's my wedding. It's supposed to be the best day of my life, and I'm supposed to pay for it. You can afford it. There it was again. That assumption. That because I'd worked hard and built something, it belonged to them. I looked at my father. Do you have any idea how many things I gave up so she wouldn't have to? He stared back at me, unmoved. That's what family does. No, I said. That's what I did. There's a difference. My mother reached for my arm. I stepped back. Caroline, please. We raised you. We gave you everything. You gave me responsibility, I said. You gave me chores and guilt and the message that my job was to make her life easier. You didn't give me everything. You gave her everything. I had to earn mine. My sister's face twisted. This is ridiculous. You have a great career. You make good money. What's $50,000 to you? I looked at her for a long moment. Really looked at her. At the ring on her finger that probably cost $20,000. At the designer bag on the counter. At the girl who'd spent her whole life being told she deserved things while I was told I needed to provide them. It's the cost of my peace, I said. And I'm done paying it. The kitchen went silent. What? My mother whispered. I'm not sending the money. My father's voice went hard. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. My sister started crying. Loud, dramatic sobs that I'd heard 1,000 times before. The kind that used to make me cave immediately. You're ruining my wedding, she choked out. I didn't plan your wedding, I said. I didn't propose. I didn't pick a date. I didn't promise you anything. But you're family. Exactly. I'm family. Not a bank account. Not a backup plan. Not your emergency fund for when you overspend on a ring. My mother was crying now too. We've already told people. We've made promises. That sounds like your problem, I said. My father pointed at the door. If you walk away from this, don't expect us to forgive you. I picked up my bag. My hands were steadier than I expected them to be. You know what? I said. I think I'm okay with that. My sister's face went red. You're heartless. I shook my head. No. I just stopped letting you use my heart against me. I walked to the door. Behind me, my mother was saying my name over and over. My father was silent. My sister was still crying. At the door, I turned back one last time. I came here because I love you. Because I was terrified something had happened to you. Remember that when you're angry at me later. Remember that I dropped everything because I thought you needed me. And you used that. Nobody answered. I walked out into the evening air. Behind me, the house erupted in voices, arguing, blaming, trying to figure out what to do now. But it sounded distant. Like something happening to someone else. For the first time in my life, their crisis wasn't mine. The messages started before I got to my rental car. My mother first. Long paragraphs about disappointment and sacrifice and how could I do this to them. Then my father. Shorter, colder. Reminding me of everything they'd done for me. Calling me ungrateful. My sister's messages were pure anger. I'd ruined her life. I'd taken away something she deserved. I was selfish and cruel and she'd never forgive me. I didn't respond to any of them. I drove to a hotel near the airport. Ordered room service. Sat on the bed and stared at my phone as the messages kept coming. And I felt nothing. No guilt. No panic. No urge to fix it. Just a strange, quiet calm. The next morning, I flew home. I sat in my apartment that I'd paid for, in a city I'd chosen, living a life I'd built, and I canceled the automatic payments. It took 30 seconds. Just a few clicks. 3 years of monthly transfers, gone. I felt a flicker of the old guilt trying to surface. The voice that said family doesn't abandon family. That said I was being cruel. But then I remembered my mother's face when I walked in. The way she'd looked at my father. The wedding binder on the table. The ring on my sister's finger. The way they'd used my fear. And the guilt disappeared. Word spread through the family fast. An aunt called, carefully neutral, asking what happened. A couple of cousins texted. Everyone had heard some version of the story. I told the truth when people asked. Calmly. No drama. Just the facts. I'd been sending money for 3 years for supposed emergencies. They'd called me with an urgent request that sounded like someone was dying. I'd flown home to find out they wanted $50,000 for my sister's wedding. I said no. Some people got quiet. Some people tried to smooth things over. A few told me I was right. But most just didn't know what to say. The wedding changed. It had to. Without my money, they couldn't afford the venue they'd wanted. The guest list got smaller. The plans got simpler. Nobody said my name out loud, but I heard it in the silences. In the way conversations stopped when I called. In the careful way people asked how I was doing. My sister got married 6 months later. I wasn't invited. I didn't expect to be. I heard through my aunt that it was nice. Small, but nice. My sister looked beautiful. Everyone had a good time. And I felt relief. Not vindication. Not satisfaction. Just relief that it was done and I hadn't been part of it. A year passed. Then another. My life kept moving forward. Work promotions. New friends. A relationship that actually felt healthy because it started with someone seeing me, not what I could provide. I didn't miss the chaos. I didn't miss the emergency calls or the guilt trips or the constant feeling that I was never doing enough. My parents tried to reach out a few times. Birthday texts that felt obligatory. Holiday messages that said thinking of you but never we're sorry. I responded politely. Brief. Distant. The way you talk to acquaintances, not family. My sister never contacted me at all. And that was okay. One night, about 2 years after I'd walked out of that kitchen, I was sitting on my couch with the windows open. It was late spring. I could hear the city outside, alive and moving. My phone was on the coffee table, silent. And I realized something. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't waiting for the next emergency call. I wasn't bracing for the next guilt trip. I wasn't preparing for the next crisis that would somehow become my responsibility to fix. I was just living. For the first time in my entire life, my life was actually mine. I didn't win anything that day I walked out. No apologies. No acknowledgement. No dramatic reconciliation where everyone realized they'd been wrong. But I gained something more valuable than any of that. I gained myself back. The daughter who'd spent 27 years being useful finally learned how to be whole instead. And whole didn't require their approval or their understanding or their love. It just required me choosing it. I used to think family meant endurance. That love meant staying quiet and paying whatever price they asked. I know better now. Real love doesn't drain you. It doesn't weaponize your fear. It doesn't call you at midnight with fake emergencies so you'll hand over money you worked hard to earn. Real love doesn't make you choose between your peace and their approval. Walking away wasn't cruel. It wasn't heartless. It was the most honest thing I'd ever done. And honesty, it turns out, is what gave me my life back. Thanks for listening, and if you liked this story, share it with others, and don't forget to comment and subscribe for more stories about family dynamics, setting boundaries, and choosing yourself when love becomes manipulation. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop letting people hurt you.